The bullet had missed her by 3 inches, close enough for Beatrice Reynolds to smell the gunpowder as it singed past her cheek and embedded itself into the wooden post behind where she stood on the raised platform in the center of Laredo, Texas. It was May of 1878, and the scorching sun beat down on the dusty street as men and women gathered around her makeshift schoolhouse podium, their faces twisted with anger and something darker, something that looked like fear. "She is teaching our children lies," shouted Mrs. Henderson, her face red beneath her bonnet. "Mathematics beyond counting, science that contradicts the good book, and now she wants to teach them about the stars and planets as if any decent woman needs to know such things." Beatrice stood tall despite her trembling hands, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, her simple gray dress modest but clean. At 23 years old, she had spent the last 2 years trying to educate the children of Laredo, teaching them reading, writing, arithmetic, and yes, the sciences that fascinated her so deeply. Her father had been a professor back east before consumption took him when she was 17. He had educated her thoroughly, perhaps too thoroughly for a woman trying to make her way in a Texas border town where the cattle trade ruled and education was viewed with suspicion. "I am teaching your children facts," Beatrice said, keeping her voice steady, even as another man in the crowd spit tobacco juice dangerously close to her feet. "The earth orbits the sun. Water is composed of hydrogen and oxygen. These are not opinions. They are truths that can be proven through observation and experimentation." "You are putting ideas in their heads," said Mr. Carmichael, the town banker, his mustache quivering with indignation. "My daughter came home yesterday talking about molecules and atoms, things no decent girl should concern herself with. She should be learning to sew and cook, not filling her head with notions that will make her unmarriageable." "Perhaps being educated would make her a better wife," Beatrice countered, immediately regretting the sharpness in her tone. "A woman who can calculate household expenses, who understands basic chemistry for cooking and medicine, who can teach her own children to read." "Surely these are valuable skills," the crowd murmured, but not in agreement. Beatrice saw the way they looked at her, the way they had been looking at her for months now. She was too smart for her own good, they whispered. No man would want a wife who knew more than he did. She was unnatural, unwomanly, dangerous even. The school board had voted 3 times to keep her employed, only because no one else would teach for the meager salary they offered. But now even that thin thread of tolerance was fraying. "The school board has made a decision," announced Judge Winters, stepping forward with an official-looking document. "Miss Reynolds, your services are no longer required. We will be closing the school until we can find a more suitable teacher, one who understands the proper limits of education, particularly for young ladies." Beatrice felt her stomach drop. Teaching was her only income, her only purpose in this town where she had no family and few friends. "Judge Winters, please. I can modify my curriculum. I can focus more on the traditional subjects." "It is too late for that," he said, though his voice was not entirely unkind. "You have unsettled too many people, Miss Reynolds. Perhaps you would be happier returning east, where such modern notions are more accepted." But Beatrice had no money for the journey east, and no family waiting for her there even if she did. Her mother had died years ago, and her father's colleagues had scattered after his death. Laredo was all she had, and now even that was being taken from her. The crowd began to disperse, shooting dark looks in her direction. Beatrice gathered her few teaching materials, her hands shaking as she packed away the slate board and chalk, the precious books she had brought from her father's library. She was so focused on her task that she did not notice the tall figure approaching until a shadow fell across her workspace. "They are fools, the lot of them!" Beatrice looked up sharply, ready to defend herself against another attack, but the man standing before her did not look angry. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He wore dusty trail clothes, leather chaps over worn denim, a faded red shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face from the merciless Texas sun. A gun belt hung low on his hips, the revolver well-maintained, but not showy. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30 at most. I beg your pardon, Beatrice said, straightening her spine defensively. Those people, he said, gesturing toward the retreating crowd. Fools. Smart is good for everyone, seems to me. A person who can think and reason, who knows about the world, that is someone valuable, whether they are wearing trousers or a dress. Beatrice studied him cautiously. You are not from Laredo. No, madam. Name is Thomas Dalton. My friends call me Tom. I have been working on the ranches north of here, moving cattle up to the railheads in Kansas. Just got back from a drive yesterday. He pulled off his hat, revealing dark hair dampened with sweat. I heard the commotion and came to see what the fuss was about. Seems like a whole lot of noise over nothing. Nothing? Beatrice could not keep the bitterness from her voice. I have just lost my position, my income, and likely my home since I rent a room from Mrs. Patterson, who was in that crowd looking ready to string me up herself. Tom's expression grew serious. I am sorry, that was poorly said. I meant that your crime, teaching children to think, is no crime at all. The punishment is the thing that is wrong, not what you did. He turned his hat in his hands, a gesture that seemed almost nervous. Are you really teaching them about the stars? My mother used to tell me stories about the constellations when I was young, before she passed. I always wished I knew more about them. Despite everything, Beatrice felt a small smile tug at her lips. Yes, the stars follow predictable patterns. Understanding them can help with navigation, with understanding the seasons, with comprehending our place in the universe. See, now that sounds useful, Tom said. If I had known more about the stars, I might have gotten lost, less often driving cattle through unfamiliar territory. He paused, seeming to consider something. Miss Reynolds, can I ask you something direct? I know it is not my business, but do you have any prospects here now? Anyone who might hire you, or family who could help? Beatrice felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. That is rather forward of you, Mr. Dalton. Tom, please, and I know it is forward, but I am trying to determine if I should make you an offer or if I would just be insulting you by assuming you need help. What kind of offer? Beatrice asked warily. She had heard stories of what happened to women alone in the West, the kind of offers desperate men made. Tom must have seen something in her expression, because he held up his hands quickly. Nothing improper, I swear on my mother's grave. I work for the Double R Ranch, about 15 miles north of here. The owner, Robert Russell, is a good man, progressive, some would say. He has been trying to start a school for the children of his ranch hands, but he cannot find anyone willing to come out that far from town. The pay would not be much, but it would include room and board in a private cabin, and you would be away from these narrow-minded townspeople. Beatrice stared at him. You are offering me a job? You do not even know me. I know you stood up there and defended education and reason while people shouted at you and someone shot at you, Tom said simply. I know you care enough about teaching to take a position in a dusty border town like Laredo when you clearly have the education to do better elsewhere. That tells me enough about your character. He settled his hat back on his head. But if you would rather not, I understand. I just thought I would offer before you made other plans. I have no other plans, Beatrice admitted quietly. And truthfully, Mr. Dalton, Tom, I would be grateful for any honest work at this point. Then let me help you pack up your things, Tom said. I need to head back to the ranch anyway. I can take you there, introduce you to Mr. Russell, and if he agrees, which I am certain he will, you can start whenever you are ready. Beatrice hesitated only a moment before nodding. What choice did she have, really? Stay in Laredo and face the hostility of the townspeople, or take a chance on a stranger who seemed kind and offered her a way forward? Her father had always told her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Thank you, she said softly. I accept your offer. Tom's face broke into a genuine smile, the first real warmth Beatrice had seen directed at her in weeks. Good. Let me get my horse and a wagon. Do you have much to move? Only what I can carry, Beatrice said. Books, mostly, and a trunk of clothes. Then we will have you settled before sundown, Tom promised. As he strode away to arrange transportation, Beatrice watched him go, wondering what she had just agreed to. She knew nothing about this man except that he had defended her when no one else would, that he thought smart was good for everyone, and that he had kind eyes and a manner that suggested honesty. It was not much to base a life-changing decision on, but it was more than she had at the moment. True to his word, Tom returned within the hour with a sturdy wagon and a patient bay horse. He helped Beatrice load her trunk and boxes of books, treating each volume with respect when he saw the titles. Natural Philosophy by Joseph Henry, he read aloud. A treatise on astronomy by Nathaniel Bowditch. You really do know about the stars. My father believed in thorough education, Beatrice said, carefully wrapping her most precious books in a spare blanket. He taught at Columbia before his health failed. We came west for the dry climate, hoping it would help his lungs, but it was too late by then. I am sorry, Tom said, and the simple sincerity in his voice made Beatrice's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. It was 6 years ago, she said, blinking back tears she had no time for. I have learned to carry on. They finished loading in silence, and then Beatrice went to settle her account with Mrs. Patterson, who barely looked at her as she accepted the final week's rent. The landlady's cold dismissal stung, but Beatrice lifted her chin and walked out without giving the older woman the satisfaction of seeing her upset. Tom was waiting by the wagon, and he helped her up onto the bench seat with easy courtesy. As they rolled out of Laredo, Beatrice looked back at the town that had rejected her, feeling a complex mixture of hurt, anger, and surprisingly relief. Perhaps this was for the best. Perhaps she would find a better place at the Double R Ranch, wherever that might be. The journey north took them through increasingly wild country. The road, such as it was, wound through scrubland dotted with mesquite and prickly pear cactus. The May heat was intense, and Beatrice was grateful for the broad-brimmed bonnet that shaded her face. Tom drove with the easy confidence of someone who knew the land well, occasionally pointing out landmarks or wildlife. That is Rattlesnake Ridge over there, he said, gesturing to a rocky outcropping in the distance. And if you look careful near that creek bed, you can sometimes spot antelope coming to drink. Have you worked at the Double R long? Beatrice asked, curious about this man who had so unexpectedly changed her circumstances. About 3 years now, Tom said. I was working smaller ranches before that, moving around a lot. Mr. Russell gave me a permanent position and made me one of his lead hands. He is fair, pays on time, and treats his workers with respect. That is rarer than it should be in this business. What made you stop in Laredo today? Tom glanced at her, then back at the road. Needed supplies for the ranch, and I like to visit the town every few months, see if there is any news, check the mail. I was just leaving when I heard the shouting. Curiosity got the better of me, I suppose. I am glad it did, Beatrice said honestly. Though I am sorry you had to witness that scene. Nothing to be sorry for. You were defending yourself and your principles. That takes backbone. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Can I ask what made you want to teach in the first place? It seems like hard, thankless work, especially for a woman with your education. Beatrice considered the question. My father once told me that education was the greatest gift one person could give another. It opens doors, creates possibilities, allows people to transcend their circumstances. After he died, I found myself with all this knowledge he had given me, and it seemed selfish to keep it to myself. So I started teaching, first in St. Louis, then in smaller towns as I moved west, trying to find a place where I belonged. Have you found it yet? That place where you belong? No, Beatrice admitted. Every town is the same eventually. At first, they are glad to have a teacher, any teacher. But then they start to resent that I know things they do not, that I teach their daughters the same subjects as their sons, that I believe women are just as capable of learning complex subjects as men. They start to see me as a threat rather than an asset. Tom was quiet for a long moment. I think maybe you have been teaching in the wrong places. Not everyone thinks like those people in Laredo. In my experience, most people do. Then your experience has been limited, Tom said, but there was no judgment in his tone, just a statement of fact. There are people out here who care more about what you can do than what society says you should do. Mr. Russell is one of them. His wife, God rest her soul, was an educated woman from Boston. She taught him to value learning. That is why he wants a school on his ranch. She passed away? Beatrice asked gently. 2 years ago. Fever. It hit her hard and fast, and there was nothing anyone could do. Tom's voice was heavy with old grief. She was a good woman, kind to everyone. The ranch has not been quite the same without her, but Mr. Russell does his best to honor her memory by continuing the things she cared about, like education for all the children on the property. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the wagon wheels creaking, the horses' hooves clopping steadily against the hard-packed earth. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Despite the uncertainty of her situation, Beatrice felt something in her chest loosen slightly. The open landscape, the clean air, the presence of someone who did not look at her with suspicion or disdain. It was almost peaceful. "Tell me about the ranch," she said eventually. "How many children would I be teaching?" "Last count, about 15, ranging from age 5 to 14, Tom said. "Some are children of the regular ranch hands. Others belong to the families who work in the main house or tend the horses. Most cannot read beyond a few basic words, and their arithmetic is limited to counting cattle." 15 students of varying ages, Beatrice mused. "That will be challenging but manageable. I will need to assess their individual levels and create lesson plans that can accommodate everyone." "See, this is exactly what they need," Tom said, a note of enthusiasm entering his voice. "Someone who thinks about how to actually teach them, not just someone watching them for a few hours while their parents work." "Education is not babysitting," Beatrice agreed. "It requires planning, patience, and a genuine desire to see students learn and grow. You really love it, don't you?" "Teaching, I mean," Beatrice thought about the question seriously. "Yes, even when it is difficult, even when I face opposition, there is nothing quite like the moment when a student's face lights up with understanding. When they grasp a concept that was puzzling them, when they read their first sentence, when they solve a mathematical problem on their own. Those moments make everything else worthwhile." Tom looked at her with something like admiration. "Mr. Russell is going to be very glad I found you." "I hope you are right," Beatrice said, but she was starting to believe it might be true. The Double R Ranch came into view as the sun touched the horizon. It was larger than Beatrice had expected, a sprawling operation with a big main house painted white, several barns and outbuildings, extensive corrals filled with horses and cattle, and a scattering of smaller cabins for the workers. Everything looked well maintained, prosperous, but not ostentatious. Tom drove the wagon up to the main house and helped Beatrice down. "Wait here a moment. Let me find Mr. Russell and explain the situation." Beatrice stood by the wagon, very aware of the curious glances from ranch hands going about their evening chores. She smoothed her skirt and tried to look composed, though her heart was beating rapidly. What if Mr. Russell did not want her? What if Tom had overstepped his bounds by bringing her here? But when Tom emerged from the house a few minutes later, he was accompanied by a distinguished-looking man in his early 50s, with silver-threaded hair and a neatly trimmed beard. Robert Russell had the bearing of someone accustomed to authority, but his eyes were kind as he approached Beatrice. "Miss Reynolds," he said, extending his hand in a gesture that surprised her. Most men would not shake hands with a woman. "Tom has been telling me about your qualifications and the unfortunate situation in Laredo. I must say, their loss is my gain. I have been looking for a proper teacher for months. Beatrice shook his hand, feeling a flicker of hope. Mr. Russell, I appreciate you considering me on such short notice. I assure you, I am fully committed to providing quality education for your students. Tom mentioned you were teaching advanced mathematics and science, Mr. Russell said. Is that correct? Yes, sir. I believe in providing a comprehensive education that includes the sciences, literature, history, and mathematics beyond basic arithmetic. Of course, I adapt my teaching to the age and ability of each student. Excellent, Mr. Russell said, and he sounded genuinely pleased. My late wife would have approved heartily. She always believed that limiting education based on gender or social class was a waste of human potential. He gestured toward one of the cabins. That small cabin near the creek is currently vacant. It is modest but sound, with a good stove and adequate furnishings. It would be yours along with meals in the main house or provisions to cook for yourself, whichever you prefer. The salary is $40 a month. $40 was more than Beatrice had been making in Laredo. That is very generous, Mr. Russell. It is fair compensation for important work, he corrected. When can you start? As soon as you need me, Beatrice said, though I would like a day or two to settle in and prepare lesson plans. Of course. Shall we say you will meet the students on Monday? That gives you 3 days to prepare. Tom, would you help Miss Reynolds get settled in the cabin? Happy to, sir, Tom said. Mr. Russell nodded to both of them and headed back toward the main house, already calling out instructions to someone about preparing a welcome dinner for the new teacher. Tom drove the wagon to the small cabin and helped Beatrice unload her belongings. The cabin was indeed modest, just 2 rooms with a sleeping area and a main room with a table, 2 chairs and a functional stove. But it was clean and private, with glass windows that let in the fading light and a small porch that overlooked the creek Mr. Russell had mentioned. It is not fancy, Tom said apologetically as he set down her trunk. It is perfect, Beatrice said, and she meant it. After months of living in a cramped boarding house room with thin walls and a landlady who monitored her every move, this little cabin felt like a palace. Truly, Tom, thank you for everything. I do not know what I would have done if you had not intervened today. Tom shifted his weight, looking pleased but embarrassed. Anyone decent would have done the same. But they did not. You did. Beatrice stepped closer and impulsively squeezed his hand. Thank you. Tom looked down at their joined hands, his expression unreadable in the dimming light. You are welcome, Miss Reynolds. I will let you get settled now. If you need anything, my cabin is just over there. He pointed to a structure about 100 yards away. And the main house is always open if you need supplies or help. After he left, Beatrice stood in the doorway of her new home, watching the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. She picked out Polaris, the North Star, steady and reliable. Perhaps this was the guidance she had been seeking, this unexpected turn that had brought her to the Double R Ranch. Perhaps here, finally, she could do the work she loved without constantly fighting for the right to do it. She thought about Tom Dalton, about the way he had stood up for her without even knowing her, about his simple statement that smart was good for everyone. Most men would have ignored the scene in town, or worse, joined the crowd in condemning her. But he had seen something different, had valued what others rejected. Beatrice went inside and began unpacking her books, arranging them carefully on the small shelf by the window. As she worked, she found herself smiling, feeling something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. The next 3 days passed in a flurry of activity. Beatrice explored the ranch, familiarizing herself with its layout. She met some of the families whose children she would be teaching and found them cautiously welcoming. They were working people, practical and direct, but not hostile to the idea of education. Several mothers expressed hope that their daughters might learn to read well enough to enjoy books. Mr. Russell provided her with basic school supplies, slates, chalk, paper, pencils, and several primers for beginning readers. Beatrice supplemented these with her own books and created lesson plans that would challenge students at multiple levels simultaneously. She saw Tom occasionally during those 3 days. He would tip his hat when they passed, or stop to ask how her preparations were going. Once he brought her a chair he had repaired, saying he had noticed hers was wobbly. Another time, he left a basket of fresh eggs and bread on her porch with a note saying, "Thought you might be too busy to cook." Tom. These small gestures touched Beatrice more than she wanted to admit. She found herself watching for him, noticing when he rode out with the other cowboys in the morning, and feeling relieved when she saw him return in the evening. She told herself it was simply gratitude for his help, but she knew it was becoming something more. On Monday morning, Beatrice walked to the building Mr. Russell had designated as the schoolhouse. It was actually a converted storage barn, but it had been cleaned and fitted with benches and a large table that would serve as her desk. Someone had even hung a slate board on one wall. The students arrived in small groups, some eager, some shy, some clearly reluctant. Beatrice greeted each one by name, having memorized the list Mr. Russell had provided. There was 8-year-old Sarah Thompson, bright-eyed and curious, 10-year-old Miguel Santos, who watched everything carefully but said little, 14-year-old Henry Morrison, tall and awkward, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else, and a dozen others, each with their own personality and story. "Good morning, everyone," Beatrice began, standing before them with her hands folded calmly despite her nerves. "My name is Miss Reynolds, and I will be your teacher. I want to begin by telling you what I believe about education. I believe every person in this room is capable of learning regardless of age, gender, or background. I believe education is not something to be feared or resented, but something to be treasured. And I believe that what you learn here can help you in every aspect of your life, whether you become a rancher, a shopkeeper, a wife and mother, or anything else you dream of being." She saw several students sit up straighter, interest sparking in their eyes. "We will be studying reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, and the sciences," Beatrice continued. "But we will also be learning to think, to question, to observe the world around us, and understand it better. Some of what we study will be challenging, but I promise to help each of you according to your needs. Are there any questions before we begin?" A small hand shot up. Sarah Thompson. "Miss Reynolds, is it true you know about the stars?" Beatrice smiled. "Yes, I do. Would you like to learn about them too?" "Yes, please." "Then we will make astronomy one of our subjects," Beatrice promised. "We will learn to identify constellations and understand how the movements of celestial bodies affect our seasons and tides." She saw confusion on some faces at words like celestial, but also interest. Henry Morrison, the oldest student, raised his hand. "Will you be teaching the girls the same things as the boys?" "Yes," Beatrice said firmly. "In my classroom, all students are equal. Gender does not determine intellectual capability." "My pa says women do not need book learning," Henry said, not confrontationally, but as a simple statement of fact. "Your father is entitled to his opinion," Beatrice said carefully. "But if he did not want you receiving education alongside girls, he would not have sent you to this school. I will teach everyone who wishes to learn, and I will hold everyone to the same standards. Does that seem fair?" Henry considered this, then nodded slowly. "I suppose so, madam." The first day was exhausting but exhilarating. Beatrice assessed each student's current level, discovering that several could barely read and most had only rudimentary arithmetic skills. But they were eager, more eager than the town children in Laredo had been, perhaps because education was a new opportunity rather than an obligation. When the school day ended at 3 o'clock, Beatrice was physically and mentally drained but satisfied. She had reached them, she was certain of it. Given time, she could help these children exceed even their own expectations. She was tidying the schoolhouse when Tom appeared in the doorway, still dusty from his work. "How did it go?" he asked. "Wonderfully," Beatrice said. unable to keep the enthusiasm from her voice. They are curious and willing to learn. It is everything I hoped for. I am glad, Tom said, and his smile was warm. I knew you would be good at this. The children deserve someone like you. Someone like me? Beatrice echoed. Someone who believes in them, who sees their potential instead of their limitations. He leaned against the door frame, looking relaxed and comfortable. If you are not too tired, would you like to take a walk? I thought I could show you some of the ranch, the parts you probably have not explored yet. Beatrice knew she should probably go back to her cabin and prepare lessons for tomorrow, but the prospect of spending time with Tom was too appealing to resist. I would like that. They walked through the ranch as the sun lowered toward the horizon, Tom pointing out various features and explaining the workings of the operation. He showed her the horse corrals, where sleek quarter horses watched them with intelligent eyes. He explained the seasonal patterns of ranching, the spring brandings, the summer drives, the fall preparations for winter. You really love this life, Beatrice observed. I do, Tom admitted. It is hard work and sometimes dangerous, but there is something honest about it. You put in effort, you see results, you care for the animals and the land, and they provide for you. It makes sense to me in a way that city living never did. Where are you from originally? Missouri, near Kansas City. My father was a blacksmith. My mother took in sewing. I was the youngest of four. When my mother died, the family sort of scattered. I was 17, thought I was ready to make my own way. He smiled ruefully. Turns out I was not quite as ready as I thought, but I learned fast. That must have been difficult, being on your own so young. It was, but it also taught me to rely on myself, to figure things out. He glanced at her. Sort of like you, I suppose, making your way alone after your father passed. Yes, I suppose we have that in common, Beatrice said softly. They had walked to a slight rise that overlooked the ranch. Below them, the buildings glowed golden in the evening light. Above them, the sky was beginning to show the first stars. Could you show me some constellations? Tom asked. You mentioned teaching the children about them. Beatrice stepped closer to him so she could point more easily. See those 7 bright stars forming a sort of dipper shape? That is Ursa Major, the Great Bear. Some people call it the Big Dipper. If you follow the 2 stars at the end of the dipper's bowl upward, they point directly to Polaris, the North Star. Tom followed her pointing finger. I see it. That is the one that sailors use for navigation, right? Exactly. Polaris stays almost fixed in the northern sky, so if you know where it is, you always know which direction is north. She pointed to another constellation. And that bright blue-white star there is Vega, part of the constellation Lyra. In Greek mythology, Lyra was the lyre of Orpheus, the great musician. You make the stars sound like stories, Tom said, his voice quiet with wonder. They are stories, Beatrice said. Ancient peoples did not have books or televisions, so they told stories about the stars, creating mythologies that helped them remember the patterns and navigate by them. The science and the stories are not separate. They are intertwined. I never thought about it that way. Tom was standing very close now, close enough that Beatrice could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. You have a gift for making complex things understandable. My father's gift, really. He taught me that true understanding comes from being able to explain something simply. Your father must have been a remarkable man. He was, Beatrice said, surprised to find her eyes stinging with sudden tears. I miss him every day. Without thinking, Tom reached out and gently squeezed her shoulder, a gesture of comfort that felt entirely natural. He would be proud of you, I think, of what you are doing here. Beatrice looked up at him, at his kind face silhouetted against the darkening sky, and felt something shift in her chest. This man, who barely knew her, seemed to understand her better than people she had known for years. Thank you, Tom, for everything, for defending me in Laredo, for bringing me here, for believing that smart is good for everyone. I meant what I said that day, Tom replied. Intelligence is not something to fear or suppress. It is something to celebrate and encourage. He paused, seeming to wrestle with something internally. Beatrice, can I be honest with you? Her heart skipped at his use of her first name. Of course. I find myself thinking about you far more than is probably appropriate for someone who just met you last week, Tom said, his voice low and earnest. I admire your courage, your intelligence, your dedication to teaching those children. I enjoy our conversations. I look for opportunities to see you, even just in passing. If I am overstepping, please tell me, and I will maintain a respectful distance. But if there is any chance you might feel even a fraction of what I am feeling, I would like to know. Beatrice's breath caught. She had been telling herself her attraction to Tom was simply gratitude, nothing more. But standing here with him in the twilight, she could not deny the truth anymore. You are not overstepping. I find myself looking for you too, hoping you will stop by, treasuring these moments we spend together. I have never met anyone quite like you, Tom. You make me feel seen and valued in a way I have never experienced before. Tom's hand moved from her shoulder to gently cup her cheek. May I kiss you? Yes, Beatrice whispered. He kissed her softly, tenderly, his lips warm against hers. It was Beatrice's first kiss, and it sent sparks through her entire body. When they parted, she was breathless and smiling. I have been wanting to do that since the moment I saw you standing on that platform, defending your principles to that angry mob, Tom admitted. Really? That quickly? Really? There was something about you, the way you held yourself with such dignity despite everything. I knew right then that you were special. They stood together on the rise, holding hands and watching the stars emerge one by one, neither wanting to break the spell of the moment. Eventually, practical concerns intruded, and Tom walked Beatrice back to her cabin, kissing her once more at the door before bidding her good night. Over the following weeks, Beatrice threw herself into teaching with renewed energy. Her students progressed rapidly, especially the younger ones whose minds were so receptive. Sarah Thompson was reading at a level 2 years beyond her age. Miguel Santos revealed a gift for mathematics, solving complex problems with ease once he understood the underlying principles. Even Henry Morrison, initially resistant, began to show interest, particularly in the history and geography lessons. Beatrice incorporated practical applications into her teaching. When teaching mathematics, she used examples from ranching, calculating the amount of feed needed for a certain number of cattle, determining the distance traveled on a cattle drive based on miles per day. For science, she took the students outside to observe the natural world, teaching them about the life cycle of plants, the behaviors of different animals, the properties of soil and water. The parents were pleased with the visible progress their children were making. Several came to Beatrice expressing gratitude, saying their children talked excitedly about school every evening. Even the most skeptical began to see the value in education when their children could suddenly calculate change from a purchase or read the labels on products. Through it all, Beatrice's relationship with Tom deepened. They spent their evenings together whenever possible, talking about everything and nothing. Tom told her about his adventures on cattle drives, the challenges and rewards of working with animals. Beatrice shared her dreams of one day opening a school that would accept any student regardless of gender or background, where the pursuit of knowledge was celebrated. They fell in love slowly and completely, finding in each other a partnership of equals. Tom never felt threatened by Beatrice's intelligence. Instead, he celebrated it, asking her questions and listening raptly to her explanations. Beatrice appreciated Tom's practical wisdom, his understanding of the land and animals, his quiet strength and unwavering integrity. 2 months after Beatrice arrived at the Double R Ranch, Tom asked her to accompany him on a ride to check on the cattle in the northern pastures. It was a Saturday, and Beatrice had no classes, so she agreed eagerly. She borrowed a riding skirt from one of the ranch women and mounted the gentle mare Tom had saddled for her. They rode out together into the wide open rangeland, the June sun warm but not yet blistering. Tom pointed out various features of the landscape, teaching her to read the land the way she taught him to read books. See how the grass is greener near that depression? He said, pointing. That means there is water underground, probably a spring. Cattle will naturally congregate in those areas. It is like a language, Beatrice mused. The land is telling you things if you know how to listen. Exactly, Tom said, pleased. Just like your stars tell you which direction to go. They found the herd grazing peacefully and dismounted to rest in the shade of a large oak tree. Tom pulled food from his saddlebag, bread and cheese and apples, and they ate companionably. Beatrice, Tom said after a while, his tone suddenly serious. There is something I need to talk to you about. Beatrice felt a flutter of nervousness. What is it? Mr. Russell is planning a major cattle drive in September, taking a huge herd up to Dodge City. He has asked me to be one of the lead riders, which is a big responsibility and a sign of trust. I want to do it. It is important for my career here. He paused, turning his hat in his hands. But it will mean being gone for 2, possibly 3 months. Oh, Beatrice said softly, feeling a sharp pang of disappointment. I know it is a long time, Tom continued quickly. And I know we have only been together for a short while. But Beatrice, these past 2 months with you have been the happiest of my life. I do not want to leave without telling you how much you mean to me, without making my intentions clear. Your intentions? Beatrice's heart was beating very fast. Tom shifted so he was kneeling in front of her, taking both her hands in his. Beatrice Reynolds, I love you. I love your brilliant mind, your kind heart, your courage, your passion for teaching. I love the way you explain the stars and the way you laugh when something delights you. I love that you see the world as something to understand and explore, not something to fear. He took a deep breath. I know we have not known each other long, and I know this is fast, but I also know what I feel is real. When I come back from this drive, I want to come back to you, not just as a friend, but as your husband, if you will have me, that is. Tears were streaming down Beatrice's face, but they were happy tears. Tom, I love you too. I have never felt this way about anyone. You make me feel cherished and respected. You have given me not just a job, but a home, a place where I can be fully myself without apology. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I will wait for you, no matter how long the drive takes. Tom pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. You have made me the happiest man alive, he murmured against her hair. I promise I will come back to you safe and sound. And when I do, we will get married and build a life together here on the ranch. They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, talking about their future. Tom wanted children, and so did Beatrice. They discussed how they might expand the school, perhaps bringing in additional teachers as more families settled in the area. They talked about building a larger house eventually, one with a library for Beatrice's growing collection of books and a big porch where they could sit and watch the stars together. The weeks leading up to the September cattle drive passed too quickly. Beatrice continued teaching, and Tom prepared for the long journey ahead. Mr. Russell approved their engagement, giving Tom a small bonus to purchase a ring, which he presented to Beatrice one evening under their favorite oak tree. The ring was simple, a thin gold band with a small sapphire that reminded Beatrice of the evening sky. She wore it proudly, and the ranch community celebrated the engagement with a party in the main house. Beatrice met more of the extended ranch family that evening, all of whom seemed genuinely happy about the match. Tom has been like a son to me since my own boy moved back east, Mr. Russell told Beatrice. I could not have chosen a better match for him myself. You are good for each other. The night before Tom left, they sat together on the porch of Beatrice's cabin, watching the stars and holding each other close. 3 months will pass quickly, Tom said, though his voice was heavy. I will count the days, Beatrice replied. And I will write you letters, though I do not know if they will reach you. Write them anyway. I will read them all when I return. He tilted her chin up so he could see her face in the starlight. I love you, Beatrice. That will not change no matter how many miles separate us. I love you too. she whispered. Come back to me safely. I promise. They kissed one last time, a kiss that held all the love and longing and hope they felt. Then Tom stood, settling his hat on his head, and walked away toward his own cabin to get what little sleep he could before the pre-dawn departure. Beatrice watched him go, pressing her hand to her chest, where her heart ached with the bittersweet pain of love and impending separation. 3 months. She could endure 3 months. The morning Tom left, Beatrice stood with the other ranch residents to see off the massive cattle drive. More than 30 cowboys were making the journey, and the dust cloud from over 2,000 head of cattle was visible long before the herd reached the northern gate. Tom sat tall in his saddle, looking every inch the capable trail boss Mr. Russell had promoted him to be. He caught Beatrice's eye and touched the brim of his hat in salute, a gesture she returned with a wave. Then he was gone, disappearing into the dust and distance, and Beatrice felt the first real stab of loneliness she had experienced since arriving at the Double R. She threw herself into her work, expanding the curriculum and taking on additional students as word of the school's success spread to neighboring ranches. She wrote long letters to Tom, describing the students' progress, the changing of the seasons, her own thoughts and feelings. She sealed each letter carefully and added it to the growing stack on her desk, imagining the moment she would hand them all to Tom when he returned. The weeks crawled by. September turned to October, and the heat began to ease. October became November, and the first cold front swept down from the north. Beatrice received no word from Tom, but she had not expected to. Communication on the trail was nearly impossible. She simply had to trust that he was safe and would return as promised. Mr. Russell was a kind presence during this time. He checked on Beatrice regularly, inviting her to dinner in the main house and discussing the school's progress. He mentioned that he had received a telegram confirming the herd had reached Dodge City safely and been sold at good prices. The men would be returning soon, probably before Thanksgiving. Beatrice felt relief wash over her at this news. Tom was safe. He would be home soon. She began preparing for his return, airing out his cabin, which had stood empty during his absence. She baked his favorite foods and mended his shirts. She planned their wedding, consulting with Mr. Russell about using the main house for the ceremony and reception. On a cold morning in mid-November, Beatrice was teaching a mathematics lesson when she heard a commotion outside. Shouts of greeting, laughter, the sounds of many horses arriving. Her heart leapt. The drive crew was back. She struggled to maintain her composure in front of her students, but her hands were shaking as she wrote problems on the slate board. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, she dismissed the class an hour early, earning cheers from the students and knowing looks from the older ones who understood why their teacher was suddenly so distracted. Beatrice walked quickly toward the main yard, her heart pounding. Cowboys were everywhere, dusty and tired but grinning, glad to be home. She scanned the crowd frantically, looking for one particular face. And then she saw him. Tom was dismounting from his horse, moving a bit stiffly after the long ride, but whole and healthy. He turned, and their eyes met across the crowded yard. Beatrice did not care about propriety or what anyone thought. She picked up her skirts and ran to him, and Tom caught her up in his arms, spinning her around as she laughed and cried at the same time. "You came back," she said unnecessarily, her face pressed against his dusty shirt. "I promised, did I not?" Tom set her down, but did not release her, his arms tight around her waist. "God, I missed you. Every day, every mile I thought about you. I missed you too. I have so much to tell you, so many letters to give you." She pulled back just enough to look at his face, drinking in the sight of him. He was thinner, more weathered, but his eyes held the same warmth and love. "Later," Tom said. "Right now I just want to hold you." So they stood there in the middle of the yard, holding each other, while the world bustled around them. Two people who had found in each other something rare and precious. That evening, after Tom had bathed and rested, they sat together in Beatrice's cabin. Tom read through the stack of letters she had written, laughing at her descriptions of students' antics and nodding seriously at her accounts of curriculum developments. "You have accomplished so much while I was gone," he said with pride. "Mr. Russell told me enrollment has almost doubled. Word has spread to the smaller ranches. Some families are sending their children from 10 miles away." Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder. "But tell me about the drive. Was it everything you hoped?" Tom described the journey, the challenges of moving so many cattle across open territory, the river crossings that were always dangerous, the constant vigilance required to prevent stampedes. He told her about nights sleeping under the stars, about the camaraderie among the crew, about arriving in Dodge City, and the satisfaction of a job well done. "Mr. Russell has given me a raise and more responsibility," Tom said. "I will be managing more of the ranch operations, which means I will not have to go on the long drives anymore, unless I choose to. I told him I would prefer to stay close to home, especially once we are married." He took her hand, running his thumb over the ring he had given her. "Speaking of which, how soon can we make that happen?" Beatrice smiled. "How about December? Before Christmas?" "That would give us time to plan, but not so much time that we have to wait forever." "December sounds perfect," Tom agreed. He pulled her closer, kissing her thoroughly. "I love you, Beatrice. These 3 months apart have only made me more certain that I want to spend the rest of my life with you." "And I want to spend mine with you," Beatrice murmured. "You are my home, Tom. Not this cabin, not this ranch, but you." They began planning the wedding in earnest. It would be a simple affair, just the ranch community and a circuit preacher who came through once a month. Beatrice ordered a modest white dress from a dressmaker in Laredo, the same town that had rejected her months before. The irony was not lost on her, but she refused to let old bitterness taint her happiness. The students were excited about the wedding, especially the girls, who peppered Beatrice with questions about her dress and the ceremony. She used it as a teaching opportunity, explaining the history of wedding traditions and the mathematics of budgeting for an event. On the second Saturday in December, 1878, Beatrice Reynolds became Beatrice Dalton. She wore her white dress with her hair styled simply, and she carried a bouquet of winter sage that Tom had gathered for her. Tom wore his best suit, looking handsome and slightly nervous. The ceremony took place in the main house, which had been decorated with greenery and candles. Mr. Russell gave Beatrice away, standing in for the father she still missed. The preacher read the traditional vows, and Beatrice and Tom repeated them with full hearts. "I, Beatrice, take you, Thomas, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. I, Thomas, take you, Beatrice, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Tom kissed Beatrice with such tender joy that several of the watching women wiped away tears. The reception was lively, with fiddle music and dancing, abundant food, and genuine celebration. As the evening wound down, Tom and Beatrice slipped away to the cabin Tom had been expanding over the past weeks. He had added a second room, enlarged the windows, and built proper bookshelves for Beatrice's library. It was not grand, but it was theirs. That night, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and love, discovering each other with wonder and patience. Afterward, they lay entwined in each other's arms, talking softly about their future. "I want to give you everything," Tom said, running his fingers through Beatrice's long dark hair. "A beautiful home, children, security." "You have already given me the most important thing," Beatrice replied. "You have given me acceptance and love. You have never once made me feel that I should be less than I am. That is worth more than any material comfort. You will never have to hide your intelligence or dampen your ambitions with me. Tom promised. I want you to keep teaching, to keep learning, to keep growing. That is the woman I fell in love with, and that is the woman I want by my side for the rest of our lives. The winter passed peacefully. Beatrice continued teaching, and Tom managed the ranch operations with skill and dedication. They settled into married life with ease, finding joy in simple domesticity as much as in their shared intellectual pursuits. Tom had started reading more, working his way through Beatrice's library, and they would spend evenings discussing books and ideas. In the spring of 1879, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. The news filled both of them with delight and a touch of nervousness. Tom became even more protective, though he was careful not to stifle Beatrice's independence. She continued teaching until her 6th month when she finally admitted she needed to rest more. Mr. Russell hired a temporary teacher to take over the school, a young woman named Alice who had recently moved to Texas from Ohio. Beatrice spent time training her, ensuring her students would continue to receive quality education, even in her absence. On a hot July afternoon, Beatrice went into labor. Tom paced anxiously outside, while the ranch women attended to his wife. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Tom feared the worst. But finally, he heard the sound he had been waiting for, the wail of a newborn baby. The midwife emerged with a smile. "You have a son, Tom, a healthy, strong boy, and your wife is tired but well." Tom rushed inside to find Beatrice propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up at him with tears of joy streaming down her face. "Meet our son," she said softly. Tom approached carefully, in awe of the tiny human he had helped create. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a determined little face. "He is perfect," Tom whispered. "You are amazing. Thank you for this gift." They named him James Robert Dalton, James for Tom's late father, and Robert for Mr. Russell, who had become like family to them both. Little Jamie, as they called him, proved to be a content baby, curious and alert. Tom was a devoted father, taking on nighttime feedings and diaper changes without complaint, determined to be an equal partner in parenting, just as he was in marriage. Beatrice returned to teaching part-time when Jamie was 3 months old, bringing the baby with her to school. The students adored having a baby in the classroom, and it became an unexpected teaching opportunity as Beatrice explained infant development and the science of how babies learn. The years passed in a blur of happiness and growth. The school continued to expand, and eventually Mr. Russell built a proper schoolhouse with multiple rooms. Alice stayed on as a second teacher, and together she and Beatrice educated over 50 students from ranches throughout the region. In 1881, Beatrice gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Clara Rose. Clara inherited her mother's quick mind and her father's steady temperament. She was walking and talking earlier than most children, already showing signs of the intelligence that ran in the family. Tom advanced in his position at the ranch until he was essentially Mr. Russell's second in command, managing all the day-to-day operations. The ranch prospered under their joint leadership, gaining a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealings. In 1883, Mr. Russell fell ill. Despite the best efforts of the doctor from Laredo, his condition deteriorated rapidly. Before he died, he called Tom and Beatrice to his bedside. "You two have been like family to me," he said, his voice weak. "Tom, you are the son I wish I had kept close. Beatrice, you remind me so much of my dear wife with your passion for education. I want you to know that I have left the ranch to you both in my will. You have earned it through your dedication and hard work. Continue what we built here. Keep the school going. Treat the workers fairly. Make this place a beacon of what the West can be at its best." He died 2 days later, and Tom and Beatrice mourned him sincerely. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched. In his honor, they named the school the Russell Academy and commissioned a plaque explaining that it was dedicated to the memory of Robert Russell and his wife, who had believed education should be available to all. Becoming ranch owners was a significant responsibility, but Tom and Beatrice rose to the challenge. They implemented progressive policies, including better housing for workers, fair wages, and continued support for education. The Double R Ranch became known throughout Texas as a model of enlightened management. In 1885, they had their third child, another son named William Thomas, and in 1888, their fourth and final child, a daughter named Margaret Ellen. Their home was filled with laughter, learning, and love. Tom proved to be an exceptional father, patient, and engaged with all his children. He taught them to ride and rope, to understand the land and animals. Beatrice taught them to read and think critically, to question and explore. All four children attended their mother's school, where they learned alongside the children of ranch hands and neighboring families. Beatrice refused to give her own children preferential treatment, and Tom supported this decision. They wanted their children to understand that privilege came with responsibility and that education was a gift to be shared, not hoarded. As the 1880s drew to a close, Beatrice and Tom looked back on a decade of extraordinary growth and happiness. The ranch was thriving. The school had educated hundreds of students, many of whom had gone on to become teachers, doctors, lawyers, and business owners themselves. Several of Beatrice's female students had attended universities back east, something that would have been unthinkable without the foundation she had given them. One evening in the spring of 1890, Tom and Beatrice sat on the porch of their much-expanded house, watching their four children play in the yard. Jamie, now 10, was showing his siblings how to identify constellations, passing on the knowledge his mother had given him. Clara, 9, was reading aloud from a book of poetry. William, 5, and Margaret, 2, were simply enjoying the warm evening. "Do you ever think about that day in Laredo?" Tom asked, taking Beatrice's hand. "When I first saw you standing on that platform, defending education to that angry crowd." "I think about it often," Beatrice admitted. "It was one of the worst days of my life, and yet it led to the best things. If you had not been there, if you had not believed that smart is good for everyone, I do not know where I would be now." "You would have found your way," Tom said with confidence. "You are too strong and determined not to, but I am grateful every day that our paths crossed when they did. You have given me a life beyond anything I imagined. A home, a family, a purpose larger than myself." "We gave those things to each other," Beatrice corrected gently. "This is not just my achievement, or yours. It is ours together." Tom kissed her hand. "Ours together. I like the sound of that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Beatrice still taught astronomy, still took students outside on clear nights to point out constellations and planets. She had instilled in hundreds of students, including her own children, a sense of wonder about the universe and their place in it. "Mother, come look," Jamie called. "Venus is especially bright tonight." Beatrice and Tom joined their children in the yard, and together the family gazed up at the evening sky. Beatrice pointed out Venus, explaining how the planet's proximity to the sun meant it was visible only in the early evening or early morning. She showed them Mars, the red planet, and talked about the ongoing scientific debates about whether life might exist there. "Will I be able to study the planets when I grow up?" Clara asked. "You can study anything you want," Beatrice assured her. "The world is changing. More universities are accepting women now. More opportunities are opening up. Your father and I will support whatever dreams you choose to pursue." "I want to be a rancher like Papa," William announced. "Then you will be an educated rancher," Tom said, ruffling his son's hair. "You will understand not just the practical skills, but the science behind animal husbandry, the economics of running a business, the mathematics of managing resources. And if you change your mind, that will be fine too," Beatrice added. "Education gives you choices. That is its greatest gift." The children eventually went inside to prepare for bed, but Tom and Beatrice lingered under the stars. "You changed this entire community," Tom said quietly. "When you arrived, most of these children could barely read. Now we have students going to universities, pursuing professions, thinking critically about the world. You did that." We did that, Beatrice insisted. You supported me every step of the way. You defended the value of education to the other ranchers. You proved that intelligence and hard work are not gendered traits. You showed our sons that real men value and respect women's minds. You showed our daughters that they can be anything they want to be. That is just as important as anything I taught in the classroom. Tom pulled her close. 12 years ago, I told you that smart is good for everyone. I believed it then, but I had no idea how profoundly true it was. Your intelligence, your passion for teaching, your refusal to accept limitations. It has transformed not just individual lives, but an entire community. And it has transformed me. I am a better man because of you. And I am a better woman because of you, Beatrice replied. You gave me a place where I could be fully myself. You loved me not despite my intelligence, but because of it. You created a space where I could thrive. That is a gift beyond measure. They kissed under the stars they both loved, two people who had found in each other a perfect partnership. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. The ranch prospered, expanding to include more land and livestock. The school grew into a full academy with multiple teachers and a curriculum that rivaled those of city schools. Students came from increasingly distant locations to attend, and some even boarded with ranch families during the school year. Beatrice never stopped teaching, though as she grew older, she focused more on training new teachers and developing curriculum. She wrote textbooks on mathematics and science specifically designed for rural schools, books that were eventually adopted across Texas and neighboring territories. Tom remained the heart of the ranch, beloved by workers and respected by fellow ranchers. He continued to champion progressive practices, proving that treating people fairly and investing in education was not just morally right, but economically sound. Their children grew into remarkable adults. Jamie attended the University of Texas and became an engineer, eventually returning to the ranch to implement modern techniques and technologies. Clara earned a degree from Vassar College back east and became a teacher like her mother, opening a school for girls in San Antonio. William took over the day-to-day management of the ranch, combining his father's practical skills with his mother's scientific approach. Margaret, the youngest, became a doctor, one of the first female physicians in Texas. As Tom and Beatrice entered their 50s, they looked back on lives well lived. They had built something lasting, something that would continue to benefit people for generations. The Russell Academy, now a permanent institution, educated hundreds of students each year. The Double R Ranch was a model of ethical and sustainable practices. Their children and grandchildren carried forward the values they had instilled. On a cool evening in the fall of 1900, Tom and Beatrice sat on their porch, now with rocking chairs and a view that stretched for miles. They were grandparents many times over, and the house was often filled with the laughter of grandchildren. We have had a good life, Tom said, taking Beatrice's hand as he had done countless times before. The best life, Beatrice agreed. We took a terrible moment that day in Laredo when I thought everything was over, and we transformed it into something beautiful. You transformed it, Tom said. I just recognized what those fools in Laredo could not see, that intelligence is a gift, not a threat, that education benefits everyone, that smart truly is good for everyone. And you gave me the chance to prove it, Beatrice replied. You believed in me when no one else did. You stood up for me. You loved me for exactly who I am. How could I not? Tom asked softly. You are the most remarkable person I have ever known. They rocked gently, holding hands, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. The legacy they left was not measured in acres or cattle or even the school that bore Russell's name. Their legacy was in the hundreds of lives they had touched, the minds they had opened, the possibilities they had created. Years later, when historians looked back on the development of education in rural Texas, they would point to the Russell Academy and the Double R Ranch as pioneering institutions. They would note the progressive policies, The commitment to educating both boys and girls, the insistence on rigorous academic standards combined with practical skills. They would recognize Beatrice Dalton as one of the most influential educators of her era, and Tom Dalton as a rancher who understood that the future belonged to those who invested in people, not just land. But in that moment, sitting on their porch in the twilight, Tom and Beatrice were not thinking about legacies or history. They were simply grateful for each other, for the life they had built, for the love that had sustained them through decades of challenges and triumphs. "I would do it all again," Beatrice said quietly. "Every difficult moment, every obstacle, every time someone told me I was too smart for my own good, I would endure it all again to end up right here, right now, with you." "As would I," Tom replied. "Finding you, loving you, building this life with you has been the greatest adventure of my life." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Beatrice pointed out the constellations one more time, teaching Tom patterns he had learned decades ago but never tired of hearing about. And Tom held her hand, marveling as always at the woman who had come into his life that fateful day in Laredo, the woman who had been shunned for being too smart for her own good, the woman he had loved from the first moment he saw her standing tall and proud against her accusers. In the years that followed, Tom and Beatrice continued their work until age finally slowed them down. They passed away within months of each other in 1912, having shared over 30 years of marriage and a lifetime of love. At their funeral, attended by hundreds of people whose lives they had touched, their children spoke of parents who had believed in the power of education, the dignity of work, and the equality of all people. The Russell Academy continued to thrive, eventually becoming part of the public school system, but maintaining its commitment to excellence and accessibility. The Double R Ranch remained in the Dalton family, managed by William and then by his children, always holding to the principles Tom and Beatrice had established. And on clear nights, when the stars shone bright over the Texas landscape, people still told the story of Beatrice Reynolds, who had been shunned for being too smart for her own good, and Tom Dalton, the cowboy who had said smart is good for everyone. It was a story about love and courage, about standing up for what is right, about two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed and had used that love to change the world around them for the better. Their graves sat side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, marked by simple headstones that bore their names, dates, and a single line that Tom had requested. They believed in the power of knowledge and the strength of love. And every spring, their descendants would gather there, bringing their children to hear the story of how it all began, ensuring that the legacy of Beatrice and Tom Dalton would continue for generations to come. The story of their love became legend in that part of Texas, told and retold around campfires and dinner tables. It was a reminder that sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the best outcomes, that love can flourish in unexpected places, and that standing up for one's principles, even when everyone else disagrees, is always worthwhile. Most importantly, it was a testament to the simple truth Tom had recognized that day in Laredo. Smart truly is good for everyone, and intelligence, when coupled with compassion and opportunity, can transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. Their four children all lived long, productive lives, each embodying the values their parents had taught them. Jamie revolutionized ranching techniques throughout Texas with his engineering innovations. Clara educated thousands of young women, preparing them for lives of independence and purpose. William ran the Double R Ranch with the same fairness and progressive vision his father had shown. And Margaret saved countless lives as a physician, never forgetting that her opportunity to pursue medicine had come from parents who believed daughters were just as capable as sons. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren of Beatrice and Tom Dalton spread across Texas and beyond, carrying with them the story of their remarkable ancestors. Some became teachers, continuing Beatrice's educational legacy. Others became ranchers, business owners, doctors, lawyers, and engineers. But all of them grew up hearing the story of how their great-great-grandmother had been shunned for being too smart for her own good, and how their great-great-grandfather had recognized that intelligence was something to be celebrated, not feared. The Russell Academy expanded over the decades, adding buildings and programs, but always maintaining its founding principle that education should be available to everyone regardless of gender or economic status. A statue of Beatrice Dalton eventually stood in the school's courtyard with an inscription that read, "She taught us to reach for the stars, both literally and figuratively." And on the Double R Ranch, now spanning thousands of acres and managed by the fifth generation of Daltons, a small museum preserved the original cabin where Tom and Beatrice had lived, along with her teaching materials, his ranch equipment, and photographs of the life they had built together. Visitors came from around the world to learn about this remarkable couple who had proven that love and respect could bridge any divide, that education could transform communities, and that standing up for what is right always matters. Their story ended as all lives must, but their impact continued, rippling out through time in the lives they had touched and the institution they had built. They had taken a moment of rejection and humiliation and transformed it into a legacy of love, learning, and positive change. They had proved that sometimes the most unlikely circumstances produce the most beautiful outcomes, and that true partnership, built on mutual respect and shared values, can accomplish far more than either person could achieve alone. In the end, Beatrice and Tom Dalton's story was proof that intelligence combined with compassion, courage paired with kindness, and love rooted in respect could indeed change the world, one student, one decision, one act of courage at a time. And that legacy, built on the foundation of a simple truth Tom had spoken in Laredo so many years ago, continued to inspire new generations. Smart is good for everyone,